We're gonna run through the basics of APRV, how it works, how to set it up, how to wean, and then a few pitfalls. We're gonna go really fast. If I'm covering something you know easily, don't worry about it. We'll move on to something else very quickly. So first of all, this is a way to improve oxygenation. This is kind of like an advanced form of PEEP. And the way that works is through airway recruitment, increasing the functional residual capacity, getting rid of atelectasis. I used to teach it this way, and this is incorrect. I used to teach it was, alveolar air equation. The amount of oxygen in my lungs is FiO2 times the atmospheric pressure, or mean airway pressure, minus the CO2. And because FiO2 and mean airway pressure, we multiply those. That's why I improve oxygenation with FiO2 and PEEP, because those are the two biggest determinants in the alveolar air equation. Let me tell you why that's incorrect. This is the way I used to teach as well. I used to say, hey, it's just like Everest. If you went to the top of Everest, it would be really hard to breathe because the pressure there is really low, and my FiO2 is 21%, and so PEEP is like bringing you down from Everest. However, when you come down from Everest, the pressure increase just from the summit to base camp is 200 centimeters of water. Way more than I would ever set the PEEP. And furthermore, when you go from the peak of Everest to sea level, the increase in pressure there is 680 centimeters of water, way more than I could ever even get close to, even think about with a ventilator. You may say, well, Steve, those are extreme examples. You're talking about Everest. Let's talk about a more practical example. Has anyone ever ridden the elevator up the Empire State Building? Did it get hard to breathe when you got to the top? No, you probably didn't even notice a change. Because see, if I started at the top of the Empire State Building and rode the elevator all the way down, I would have an increase in 30 centimeters of water just riding down the Empire State Building, and that would be still an extremely high value to set my PEEP. And you've probably never even noticed a difference in the way you breathe. So it's not about the pressure in that the alveolar air equation, increasing the alveolar pressure, the oxygen pressure in my alveoli, but rather it's about lung recruitment. And here's why the Empire State Building doesn't help you breathe. When I start at the top and come all the way down really fast, I do have increased pressure in my lungs. However, the pressure outside of my lungs is also increased. So my transpleural pressure is not changing. And so if I was at the top of the Empire State Building and I had some atelectasis, or my FRC was low, if my lung volumes weren't what they needed to be, and I came down the Empire State Building, yes, the pressure inside my lungs would increase, but I'm not going to expand those lungs any further because the pressure outside of my lungs increased at the same rate. So the way, if I want to recruit that atelectasis, if I want to increase the FRC, what I'm going to have to do is put Haney in the hospital. I'm going to have to get him intubated, get him on the ventilator, and I'm going to have to use pressure to expand those lungs. And when I give that breath in now, the pressure inside the lungs is increasing, but the pressure outside is not changing, and that's what's going to recruit additional lung. Now, if Haney's got some atelectasis, some really bad atelectasis of the left lung here, I can increase that, I can recruit that through the use of PEEP. Now, if I don't have PEEP, like on this ventilated patient right here, and I'm dropping the pressure to 0 every time for long bits of time during exhalation, what's going to happen is, as I give the breath in, the lung will start to expand, and as I breathe out, it'll completely collapse down. And I finally start to give another breath, recruit that lung, and I breathe out, and it completely collapses down. So with most of our patients, we increase the FRC, or we recruit atelectasis by adding PEEP, by raising that baseline pressure, right? So that now, as Haney breathes in on the ventilator, he gets that higher pressure, gets those lungs open, and as he exhales, there's still pressure there, keeping those alveoli open, increasing that FRC. Breath in, and then as he exhales, he's still got pressure in. But sometimes you can only do so much with PEEP. You've got to find your perfect level of PEEP. Now again, I don't want a flat balloon. I don't want flat lungs. I don't want collapsing alveoli. So I've got to add some PEEP to overcome that. And then I get to this perfect area to where, my lungs are partially inflated, but it's still relatively easy to put a breath in. If the patient's really struggling to oxygenate and you're going up and up on that PEEP, eventually your lungs are going to get overexpanded. And you can imagine how hard it would be to blow another breath into a balloon that's fully inflated. It's the same concept here. At a certain point, your PEEP's going to get so high that your driving pressure, or your plateau minus your PEEP, is going to go really, really high. And that means your lung is overinflated, overexpanded. And you say, well, what do I do, Steve? I had to raise my PEEP all the way high. I'm still not recruiting lung. I'm still not oxygenating. that's when APRV comes into play. Now, actually, before APRV was a thing, here's how we did it. And we've been doing this for over 20 years, right? I started respiratory therapy school in 2002, and this is the way I was taught to do it. You put them in pressure control ventilation, and you invert your IE ratio. So, excuse me. So you extend your inspiratory time with a really short expiratory time to recruit that lung maximally. And that would look something like this on Haney. I give him a really long time to inhale, to fully recruit that atelectasis, and then just a short exhalation, I'm back at that high pressure, so I don't lose any of that ground I gained. Short inhalation, back at that high pressure, I'm not giving up any ground. This is what it would look like on pig lungs. Thank you to resusreview.com for permission to use this video. But you can see I have a high pressure in my lungs, and then just a short exhalation to get that CO2 out, and then I'm right back at that high pressure. Short exhalation to get that CO2 out, and then I'm back at high pressure. So if I've been doing this with pressure controlled ventilation for more than 20 years, why do I need APRV? And the answer is, in pressure controlled ventilation with an inverted IE ratio, this is, as you can imagine, a very unnatural way to breathe for our patients. And they don't tolerate it at all. And so they required very high doses of analgesia and sedation, and most of the time they would even require a paralytic to tolerate this mode. However, APRV, what I can do is I can either add tube compensation or pressure support. So now, as they're at this higher pressure, in between these releases, they can take spontaneous breaths and they can take natural breaths. So when they're at this high pressure and pressure control, if they were breathing, the work of breathing there was really, really hard, and it was going to drive up oxygen consumption. Here, with the tube compensation or pressure support at this high pressure, they can take somewhat natural breaths and they can tolerate this mode a lot better without all the sedatives, without being paralyzed. It's still an unnatural form of breathing, but it's more tolerable than pressure controlled ventilation with an inverted IE ratio. So let's talk briefly about how to set it up. I got respiratory rate, I got time high, I got time low. I'm going to set 2 of these. The 2 of these that I set are going to dictate the third. This will change some based on the vent that you're using, and at times you'll have the option about which 2 of these you want to set. So here's what I mean by that. If I've got 60 seconds in a minute and I set a respiratory rate of 10, that means each breath cycle consists of about 6 seconds. I set my time high at 5.2 seconds. That dictates the whole breath has got to take 6 seconds. I've set my time high at 5.2 seconds. That leaves 0.8 seconds for my time low. So by setting the rate, the time high, that dictated my time low. We'll look at another example. I've got 60 seconds in a minute here. I set my time high at 4.3 seconds. I set my time low at 0.7 seconds. Now each respiratory cycle is 5 seconds. By setting these 2, I dictated that each respiratory cycle is 5 seconds. Therefore, my total respiratory rate is going to be 12. When I first set this up, I need to figure out what my pressures are going to be first. And the way you do this is on your ventilator, do an inspiratory pause and check this plateau pressure. You get this plateau pressure, here's 24. What you want to do is get your mode into APRV. This is an older vent. I have to use the mode bi-level to accomplish this. You want to set that high pressure at about 3 to 4 above what your plateau pressure is. So here, my plateau is 24. I'll start with my pressure at 27. You really, when you start getting up to 28, 29, 30, that's where you want to stop, because that's the plateau that ARDS told us not to go above. So really 28 is a good starting point, or your plateau pressure plus by about 3. After you've got that set, next you want to set your times. So you can see here I set my respiratory rate to 10, and I'm extending out my time high. And what you can see is, as I extend out my time high, it shows me what my time low is. And so I'm extending out my time high until I get my time low where it needs to be. Your time low is really where you need to spend your focus, and getting that time low perfect, just right. What is just right? Well, to start, you want to look at their expiratory waveform. So these releases, when I let the air go and came back in, that's when you want to look at. And what you want to do is you want to zoom in here and look at the peak expiratory flow rate. So you can see here my peak expiratory flow rate was 140 liters per minute. And then you want to look at what the expiratory flow rate was when the next breath starts. And so here it was at 100 when the next breath started. Ideally, you want that to be about half your peak expiratory flow. So you can see here, I didn't quite get to half of my peak expiratory flow. What change in my time low would I make to get this closer to half? And the answer is obviously I would extend my time low, give them a little bit longer on that exhalation to get my expiratory flow down a little bit further. We'll look at another example. We'll find the release here when I released and had CO2 exchange. We'll zoom in. My peak expiratory flow again was about 140, and my expiratory flow when the next breath started was about 50. So I got too low on my expiratory flow. What change my time low can I make to bring this closer to half? And the answer is obviously, let's shorten the time low. So I'm closer to that 70, or exactly half of what my peak expiratory flow was. And even once you get it to about half, you're not done. The other thing you need to look at is your tidal volumes. Your tidal volumes that are exhaled with these big releases. You still have to maintain tidal volumes of 6 to 8 mLs per kg, or even less than 6 if you're an ARDS patient. You can still cause volume trauma. Even if your pressures never go above 30, you can still cause that trauma. So keep an eye on your tidal volumes. See what your tidal volumes are running. There's 7-11 in this patient, obviously probably too high. How would I decrease that? I would shorten the time low. Less time to exhale means a smaller tidal volume. That's the quick and dirty about how to set it up. Now let's talk about when your patient's doing better and you want to wean them off of it. So I've got my patient set here. I've got my pressure high set. I've got my time high set, and then I have my time low set. What you want to do as they improve is start slowly bringing that high pressure down, but in increments of probably about 2 centimeters of water, 2 to 3 centimeters of water at a time. And then you want to start extending that time high longer, which is going to, if I keep my time low constant, is going to drop the respiratory rate. I continue as they do better. I drop that pressure. I extend the time high. I drop the pressure. I extend the time high until I get to about a high pressure of about 10 centimeters of water. And at this point, if I've been extending that time high as well, their respiratory rate is going to be pretty low with this, or their release rate is going to be pretty low with this. And at this point, I'm essentially going to be in CPAP. So just switch them over to CPAP. Allow them to do a spontaneous breathing trial, see how they breathe, and if they do well, prepare them for extubation. Finally, let's cover a couple of pitfalls of APRV, and then we'll be done. So I have Haney here. He's been on APRV for a while. I finally recruited those lungs up. I've got that FRC where I want it, but my HME has a bunch of junk in it, and I need to change that HME. I disconnect the vent to change the HME, and I lose all that ground that I made up. And then when I put him back on the ventilator, it takes me quite some time to re-recruit the lungs and get that FRC back up, that functional residual capacity back up. Anytime you disconnect the vent, you can lose all of the ground you gained up, and you can be starting over from scratch. And it can take a while. It can take 15, 20 minutes for us to fully recruit all the lung we want to recruit with this mode. So what a lot of people will do is, if they need to disconnect the circuit, they'll put a clamp across the ET tube, and that way I'm not allowing any pressure to come out. Disconnect the vent, I change the HME, I do what I need to do, then reconnect the vent and take that clamp off, and hopefully I don't lose all that ground that I gained up. Some other patients that really struggle with this mode are patients with reactive airway disease, COPD patients, asthma patients. We know that they take a lot longer to exhale, a lot longer to breathe out. Therefore, when I set the time low, by the time I get them enough time to adequately breathe out to get rid of that CO2 for gas exchange to occur, I'm almost in conventional ventilation. So with patients with reactive airway disease, especially in an acute exacerbation, don't really do well with APRV. And then finally, patients with severe critical disease, severe ARDS that are really struggling to oxygenate, and that's why I'm deploying APRV. In these patients, a lot of times they're already going to be on really high dose sedatives. To decrease oxygen demand, they might even be paralyzed already. And if that's the case, if they're already there, there's really not a lot of advantage of APRV over pressure control ventilation with an inverted IE ratio, which again, I've been doing for 20 years, and I'm sure people have been doing it a lot longer than that. That's the quick and dirty on APRV. We've got a workshop on APRV to get in all the fine details of it. And then coming up, there's going to be a debate with two brilliant minds in ventilation arguing the pros and cons of this mode. So Haney, thank you for the time. I'll go ahead and pitch it back to you.